Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's Adult Issues webinar series episode on autism and safety connections for adolescents and adults with autism spectrum disorder. My name is Jill Harris at the New Jersey Autism Center of Excellence, also known as NJACE. NJACE is a statewide, innovative, comprehensive, and collaborative network to promote quality research, professional training, and build public awareness aimed to improve the lives of individuals with autism across the lifespan. The center is funded by a grant from the New Jersey Governor's Council for Medical Research and Treatment of Autism to Rutgers, the State University of New Jersey, in partnership with Children's Specialized Hospital. To learn more about NJACE, resources, and goals, please visit our website at www.njace.us. This Adult Issues webinar series is to build understanding and skills of people with autism spectrum disorder from transition to adulthood through aging. The series is intended for adults with ASD, families, friends, service providers, and the general community. Topics and experts were chosen based on input from various stakeholders, including autistic adults, caregivers, and providers. Some things to remember as we continue. On the right side of your browser, you'll see a chat box that might look something like this. In order to participate in the YouTube live chat, you must sign into your Google or YouTube account. Here's what the sign-in button looks like for both desktop and mobile YouTube clients. Once you click on that button, YouTube should redirect you to the appropriate login page, and afterward will redirect you back to the live stream, where you can now chat and ask questions to our presenter. As time permits, the presenter will address your questions at the end of her presentation. Today's webinar is being recorded, and the recording for this webinar will be provided on our website under the Resources, Webinars by NJACE tab at a later date. Please check back in a couple of days for the recording and feel free to share it with anyone. We'll also be putting a webinar evaluation link on the YouTube live chat box for participants to fill out. The evaluations help us gauge trainers and topics for future webinars, so please complete it. The evaluation is also on our website under the Resources, Webinars by NJACE tab for you to fill out there. With that, we're pleased to welcome our speaker for today, Adrian Robertiello. Adrian is a special healthcare educator at Children's Specialized Hospital, the nation's leading provider of inpatient and outpatient care for children and adolescents facing special health challenges. Ms. Robertiello's expertise focuses on educating and providing practical strategies to enhance the quality of life of youth with disabilities and increase their safety. During the past 10 years, she has developed and provided resources for individuals with disabilities and special needs, as well as for families, educators, emergency response teams, law enforcement, health professionals, businesses, and others in the community. Ms. Robertiello has developed and implemented several initiatives, including Autism and Safety, It's Unpredictable, Real-Life Tips for Kids with Autism, and Friends Like You, Friends Like Me. She is a strong advocate for building community awareness and inclusion of people living with disabilities, and also is a parent of a teen diagnosed with multiple disabilities, including autism spectrum disorder. Welcome, Adrian.
Thank you for the introduction. I'm so glad to be here today, and I'm thankful to NJACE for providing the opportunity for me to speak on this important topic. In today's webinar, we're going to talk about several things. One is many different topics related to safety and safety education in the community and at home. We're going to talk about rules and safe practices, helping individuals with autism prepare and respond to emergencies. And we're going to talk about some safety tools and resources and ways to discuss the autism diagnosis with law enforcement and emergency responders. So let's get started. So in reality, people with developmental disabilities are safest when they are included in their communities and empowered to take control of their lives. So that's really an important statement that I like to make at the beginning of the safety presentations. The more educated and inclusive and accepting and inclusive our communities are in all aspects of life, including safety, the better it is for everyone. So, as I said, we're going to cover different topics, some of them in more detail than others. So let's just start first with home safety. Now, there are household dangers for everyone. So for many people with ASD, there are often heightened risks due to sensory or behavioral, communicative, or cognitive challenges. So it's very important to work together in our households to protect the environment and to minimize risks. And the challenge and risks are different for each person. So we can't kind of generalize this across with everybody, but we can't neglect to assess these risks on an ongoing basis from early childhood all the way through adulthood. So you can see here are several different dangers that could be in the household, and those can stem from self-stimulatory behaviors, temperatures of water and potential of burning themselves or scalding, bathing, electrical outlets, just really many things that we should be assessing in our household and make sure they're safe for not only the person with autism, but everyone in the family. There are many safety resources and mechanisms designed for children, and in my experience, is a lot of it designed for typically developing children, mostly toddlers. But it's important for people with autism and other, even people with physical and developmental disabilities, to have access to developmentally appropriate and age-appropriate resources, and then those and preventive mechanisms. So you can see here lots of things that are potential environmental risks in the home. And again, we have to assess based on the person's developmental and cognitive level and their age, what devices and what educational materials are appropriate for them. So I like this website. It's not necessarily for everybody with autism. It's actually there for everyone to watch. And there's it's called WikiHow, and it kind of gives lots of resources that are helpful for everyone, often simple, understandable explanations with pictures for common tasks. Really, all someone has to do is put in how to do whatever, and something would typically pop up. Can't guarantee there's something for everything, but it definitely is a good, very pictorial way to learn how to do various things and keep many things regards to safety are on this particular website. This website here, Due to Learn, is not only for home safety, and it's actually a pretty extensive website, but there are many pictures available for visual learners. And this is an excellent site, which includes a section for adults. The link for the site is here. There's photographs, and there's lots of images here. I do find this very helpful, but personally too, I find that photographs of a person's environment are often most helpful. So if you have the ability, or the person with autism has the ability, to take pictures of various places in their homes, if you want to work on fire drills or other types of household dangers, pictures, photographs of the environment are often best, but this website is actually very, very helpful. Okay, the next thing we'll talk about is fire safety. We need to really take the time to look at the environments the person spends the most time. So looking at risks related to communication, responsiveness, the ability to evaluate safety with multiple scenarios, like preventing strategies and problem-solving skills. We really have to take the time to assess these things. Does a person understand fire prevention and response? Does the person have the ability to generalize their skills and practice with different people in different environments and scenarios? Are there self-stimulatory behaviors or focused interests which may be problematic, specifically with unintentional fire setting behaviors? And what about the sensory issues? Is a person hypersensitive to sound, or are they hyposensitive to heat? These are things that really need to be considered and assessed. Again, it's important to look for and find resources that are accurate and current and that meet the learning style and developmental level of a person with autism. Here are two resources that have been developed by the NFPA, and they're very, very helpful. And again, it depends on how a person might be able to learn best and understand these things, but we can work collaboratively to either use these in ways that are supportive and helpful for people with autism, perhaps adding some pictures, and really they're very good at the core, but they maybe need to be adapted for people with ASD, depending on their levels. You'll notice on the top right side of the screen, I have a little icon for safety education. I'm going to put that throughout this webinar just so that you can see a lot of those types of resources that are really could be used for educational tools and resources. All right, so the next topic we'll talk about is pedestrian and transportation safety. So here are some typical issues or things that we need to consider. So being a safe pedestrian actually takes more skills than we often realize. So pedestrian safety is something that involves everyone. These factors are applicable for many with ASD and can affect the person's ability to walk safely and independently throughout their community. So things like crossing streets and intersections appropriately, there could be potential injuries involved in that. They need quick problem-solving skills. There's often lots of distractions that happen while we're walking around. There's unfamiliar surroundings. We may be in a place where that's not familiar. The person might be lost and they don't know how to seek help, or they don't know where to get help. Sensory issues, environmental, the exposure to natural elements, the cold, the heat, the environment. And some people may only follow instructions that are given by people that are familiar to them. So these are just some really important things to consider when we're talking about pedestrian safety. These are some pedestrian safety tips from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. These are skills for everyone, but for folks with ASD, these can be taught in understandable ways and practiced. Based on the person's abilities, it's important to vary the environments and the situations and do it in real life scenarios, and always keep safety as a priority. Expect the unexpected, I always say to people. So tips include the rules of the road, using sidewalks and crosswalks, looking for vehicles, staying in well-lit areas, making sure drivers see you, wearing visible clothing, driveways, and staying alert and in control. These are, again, important for everyone, but again, these are educational topics that we really need to make sure that folks with ASD understand, and understand, again, importantly, in different scenarios. So this can really help to guide in many aspects of safety education. So overall, for those with ASD, it's helpful to emphasize these safety skills. So does a person know important landmark street names and how to use different methods of transportation if needed? And do they know to walk in known, well-lit locations with a person that they trust? Can they dress appropriately? That would be based on the weather, the cold, the heat, at nighttime wearing reflective clothing. Do they know what to do when they're lost? And if they are, do they have a plan, and do they know what to do? Carrying a charged cell phone, letting family and friends know where they are and when they plan to return. So this is kind of a nice little guide to put in for your basic core safety education tools. So now let's talk a little bit more about transportation safety. These are some basic core safety issues that are related to traveling in personal vehicles or school buses, using mass transit. Related to independent travel, we need to evaluate the person's problem-solving skills, their ability to react and respond appropriately and safely, the ability to follow, standard travel rules, and the ability to communicate in appropriate and effective ways. So some of these things are the ability to understand and follow safety rules for vehicles. How do they escape a vehicle safety restraint? Will they escape while they're driving? Can they escape the vehicle while they're driving, and unsafe things? These are I'm not going to list all of them, read all of them here, but these are real issues that when we're riding in a car or any other vehicle that can be dangerous not only to the person with autism, but those in the vehicles and those surrounding the vehicles. Lastly, on the bottom, I mentioned mass transit, bus and taxi and airline traffic safety issues. We're going to talk about airline in a moment, but we can only think about traveling in our own vehicles. We have to think about independence again and the ability to travel safely in any type of vehicle. So for those with autism who are drivers, these are some core safety tips that need to be understood and practiced when driving a vehicle. It can be helpful to remind themselves of these important safety tips. So looking out for pedestrian, using caution when driving in bad weather, and it's important for all of us, slowing down, yielding to pedestrian crosswalks. So again, these tips are good for everyone. Important specifically to emphasize these for drivers with ASD. And these are some additional ones here. Okay, so another helpful website that I have found is this Pedestrian and Driving Safety. It's on the NHTSA, or the National Highway Traffic Safety website. So the one to the left, there it emphasizes a lot of tips for pedestrians, and the one on the right is for drivers. So some of the tips that I just gave you can be found as a guide here on this website. We know that traffic stops can occur without notice in random areas as we're driving, and this can cause anyone a level of anxiety. And so it's important to educate those with ASD to be prepared and to be familiar with what to expect at these stops. For those who choose to disclose their diagnosis, this can be done at the point when they present documentation. So these tips here, really, again, the core safety education for people with autism. You can refer back to these slides after the webinar and really use them as a guide in education, whether that be in pictorial education or in videos, but really great points to offer. So now, specifically, let's talk about air travel safety. Now, these are some helpful suggestions for people with ASD, as well as others traveling with various special needs to promote their travel safety. So first, we'll talk about education, and we need to learn about the process of making travel arrangements. So going through security, identifying people who can help them, the types of baggage and the identification you need, travel restrictions, that's all part of the education and knowing what to do before we actually travel. Then there's preparation and preparing. So we need to be able to identify and bring the things that a person needs be comfortable on that travel and to be safe during that travel, and be able to contact people that they need to contact before they travel, right? So, just making sure everybody knows who's traveling and what the whole process is and where they're going and the whole preparing for that travel. Then identification. So we need photo identification and passports and other forms of identification for both travel domestically or internationally. So the person needs to be able to keep this documentation safe and be able to present it and get it back appropriately. So an autism ID also may, or a descriptive handout, whichever they prefer, may also be helpful if they choose and appropriate during this travel. So again, all of those types of identification needs understanding them and how to present and how to carry them safely. The next would be support. And not all of us can travel by ourselves. So some people with autism may need supports for various parts of their travel experience. It's important to plan for these supports and make sure they're in place prior to the trip. Then there's flexibility. So anything can happen with travel. That could be weather, delays, cancellations, gate changes. And this can change your flight plans. So we need to ensure that the traveler with ASD has the ability to be flexible and has the ability to initiate communication based on his or her needs. We need to look at their skills of adaptability and handling the stresses that go along with these potential scenarios. And lastly, attention. So a traveler always needs to remain attentive to what is going on, such as those gate changes, delays, and other travel situations. And so this involves problem solving and initiating communication. We also need to be aware of the potential safety concerns and how to respond to them. So we know anything can happen in an airport or in the context of a lot of things that are going on today. And so people need to know how to get help when it's needed. All right, quickly, we're going to talk also about now public restrooms. This is another community safety, common community safety topic that we should be covering. So in summary, some people may become suspicious of social interactions or communication behaviors, eye contact or gestures, the motives of people with ASD. So it's important to know those common hidden rules of public restrooms, as well as their potential risks. So this summarizes it pretty well here, but it's important for a person with ASD to develop beforehand a personal plan on how they would use a public restroom and practice the safe use of restroom with people they trust, and just have that so they know what to do. They can expect the unexpected. They could also develop and carry a personal disclosure statement if they choose, but it's just important always to be thinking about their own safety. There's a really good article here. It's a helpful resource called Using a Public Restroom. The link is there, really very helpful. It could be, it's definitely a good read. I welcome you to look at it, but what's really very helpful is that it's a video, and it kind of talks about those hidden rules that we were just discussing. All right, so after now we've talked about a lot of those household rules, home safety rules and issues. We talked about some transportation and pedestrian issues. So now let's talk about common security checkpoints and police interactions and some criminal justice that also are involved in safety. So here we can look at different places that a person might engage, a person with autism or any person might engage in with security checkpoints. So schools and campuses, in the shopping mall, during a border checkpoint or border inspections, during common community and recreation events at airports, and when we go into government or other secured buildings. So these are very common for all of us, and we need to be prepared. So these are some safety issues that are related to the common security checkpoints, any of the ones we just discussed, that a person with ASD would encounter. So what about their demeanor and their body gestures and their eye contact? How are those going to be potentially misinterpreted? There's waiting in lines and crowds. Does that person have the ability to do that comfortably and safely? There may be unknown expectations, like emptying your bag, the types of liquids that you might be able to carry, or giving up an item, a personal item, and then getting it back. So these are things that we need to be prepared for. Does the security staff understand or ASD and the temperament that may happen? We're all anxious when we get into security checkpoints. So how they may interpret or misinterpret a temperament of a person. There may be specific and random questioning. There may be body searches or vehicle searches, going through medical detectors and recording devices. So lots of these are very, very significant, and we need to be prepared for them. And I'm going to emphasize there are recreation events. There's often such that's a common thing we all go to. We go to concerts and different types of theater events and fairs and carnivals, and very often there are heightened security at these events, and we have to be prepared for those. When shopping, we need to understand safety rules when parking, when walking through parking lots. As well, we need to be aware that there are various rules and safety mechanisms in stores. These may have to do with the bags that we're carrying. It's also important that those with ASD are knowledgeable and prepared for safety-related aspects of shopping. So there may be security personnel, visible or hidden, which may be observing the demeanor of shoppers, how they interact with other people, as well as the way they handle merchandise. Some characteristics of ASD, like random organizing of merchandise, may be misinterpreted by security. Okay, the next topic for security would be school campuses and their safety and security measures that happen there. So these are some safety education tips for a person with ASD and learning about campus and getting to know security personnel on campus and connecting with their public safety communications and alerts. How does a person get alerted or alert someone else when there's a safety issue on campus? A person should learn about the school's communication about weather-related emergencies and cancellations, delays, and all those closings. And then carrying a kit with those items that are really important to their personal health or their safety with regard to emergencies. So again, we're going to talk about safety planning later on, but really we need to really reflect and help a person with autism reflect on what they need to do, not only to be prepared for an emergency on campus, but also personally and individually what they might carry and what they may need. When we're traveling in airports and there is a Transportation Security Administration, as we know it, it's TSA. This is common for every single traveler that travels domestically or internationally. So there is something as part of the TSA called TSA Cares. And so we all need to go through security checkpoints and other security measures when we're going on an airplane, but the TSA Cares assists individuals with disabilities or others who have special needs relating to going through security properly and safely. So it's important when a person with autism who may need supports or just, and it doesn't matter if they're just a little support or a lot of support, but contact the TSA Cares, this number here, 72 hours prior to travel. This can be alerting to it could be about anxiety that a person might have going through security. It could be special equipment that a person needs, the medicines that they may carry if a person has physical disability related to that. So really alerting them 72 hours prior to the trip is the best method. If you don't, and you do have issues while you're in the airport, you still can ask for a TSA personal support specialist or TSA supervisor. There's someone there. There needs to be someone there as well anytime that the airport is open. As well, if you need support through the airport in general, besides through security or boarding the plane, you can contact your individual airline provider. So now on border checkpoints and crossings, when traveling by car or you're walking from the United States into another country, it's important that people with autism understand and practice border control or border crossing procedures. And this is imperative for the person's safety. A person should find out ahead of time the location of where the crossing is and what is required to cross into the other country. This is a list of some of the features here of borderline checkpoints to be aware of and prepared for. But of most importance, the person with ASD needs to know they should never run away from the area. This can be unsafe and dangerous. Again, there's this list here, really something to review for anyone, but based on some of the characteristics of ASD, some of these may be difficult. And so the more we are prepared for these things, the better it is. Okay, so now let's talk about police interactions. Besides security officers, these are safety issues related to police interactions that a person with autism may experience. And these interactions are between autism as well as police officers, can happen unexpectedly, or their interactions can be misinterpreted. Really important to go over these and assess these. So eye contact and social skills. So how does a person with autism regard authority? Do they have that understanding of an authority figure? Does the person have uncharacteristic or unexpected communication? So understanding language, let's just say waive your rights, or a lot of the Miranda rights, or the language that a police officer may use may not be understood. There may be communication breakdowns on either side. Coping measures. So let's go back to driving. If a person's pulled over by a police officer, how do they respond to that stress? And the stimming and the self-calming mechanisms, and do the police officers understand those types of coping measures? There may be unfamiliar, conventional, unexpected behaviors that are misinterpreted. The fine motor, gross motor skills can be mistaken or misunderstood for the influence of alcohol or narcotics. Sensory issues can be affected, can be problematic for some people, with the badges, the sirens, the flashing lights, all of those, sensitivity to movement, approachability, the delayed lack of responsiveness. So giving time to think and problem solve can often be misinterpreted by a police officer who's expecting an immediate answer. And then misinterpreted defiance. So these things here, again, please review them and see how we can emphasize this in the education practices for safety for people with autism. Summarizing the misinterpretations we just talked about. So a person with autism may inappropriately use profanity. They may use echolalia or script, their lack of eye contact, turning away or running away. I'm just going to, the poor personal hygiene that a person might have. These may be misinterpreted by a police officer. So we really need to be prepared for that and talk about that openly. I'm going to read these out loud because I think they're important. So there aren't special rules for individuals who may have a disability when it comes to interacting with a police officer. We are all expected to obey the law, and there are rules everyone should follow when in the presence of police. Although the onus for successful interaction with police should not be placed on the autistic person, there are some helpful strategies that can be utilized by people with autism, their families, and/or their caregivers. So really two important statements, and one that we should carry through all of this as we're talking about police interactions. So police departments can connect with people with autism in the community, in schools and organizations, and we want to help develop positive relationships between individuals with autism and police officers. When the person gets to know their local officers in non-emergent situations, he or she can ask to practice different types of interactions and then become familiar and more comfortable and know what to do when they engage in different types of police encounters. So I'm all a big proponent for getting to know your local officers. So some police safety skills we might be able to practice is keeping a safe distance or safe space, keeping your hands visible, asking an officer or permission to move before you do, and definitely not turning and running away. This helps to prevent misunderstanding and increase safety. Really great skills for adolescents and adults to remember, for any of us actually, but really some things to definitely emphasize. When presenting an ID to an officer, the decision to disclose autism or any other diagnosis is always going to be a personal choice. Unfortunately, for many people with ASD, encounters with police officers can become dangerous situations. So, for instance, at a traffic stop, if a police officer does not recognize that the driver has autism, he or she may misinterpret the lack of eye contact or the way the person answers questions or their response to simple commands. So if an officer senses danger or feels threatened, the situation could escalate. So at that time, the person with autism may become more anxious or become quiet or potentially run away. This could put the person in quite a bit of danger. So we want to avoid these traffic encounters as best we can. Without having knowledge that a person has ASD, that officer can make judgments and respond in ways that can be avoided. The choice, again, is the person's to make, but as you can see, it may be really helpful for the officer to know that, to avoid those potentially horrible situations from occurring. Now, when it comes to identification, there are so many ID options. If you are planning to use identification and you're going to get it, be sure to ask the officer if you can get your ID. Going into clothing or bags unexpectedly can be misinterpreted. And so when telling an officer you have an ID card or a handout, you again want to avoid making sudden movements to reach in for the handout or card, and you want to get that permission, and you want to verbally let the officer know your diagnosis and you have information card to read. So if a person's nonverbal or if sudden interactions if something happened and now let's just say your anxiety has been elevated and now the person with autism is unable to speak. Those kinds of alerts or IDs that we just talked about would potentially be very, very helpful. So overall, when we're talking about interactions with either those police officers or with security, here are some safety education tips that we can work with our individuals with autism. So showing your hands, it's absolutely okay to say that you don't understand something when you don't, or if you don't know something. Don't stand too close to a person and stay in place. Don't run away. Don't turn away. Never touch a police officer or security guard. No hugging. Do you choose to disclose your diagnosis? If so, how are you presenting that? It's okay to ask the person if they are an officer and to show ID. Sometimes a person could be in plain clothes. Know that police officers are regular people too. So again, hoping to get to know that officer, your local officers and security guards and first responders in non-emergent ways to connect with them before an emergency or an unexpected encounter occurs, and never touch a police dog. So for sudden encounters with police officers, people with ASD should be aware that this could happen at any time and really work to try to remain calm. They can listen and respond to the officer respectfully. So we need to take the time to consider different situations or scenarios where these encounters might happen, discuss those risks, and practice various interactions. So following these tips here can help prevent misunderstandings and promote more successful interactions. These, again, are important considerations during sudden interactions with police. So we want to make sure we don't flee, make sudden movements, remain calm. And if you're a person is a victim of a crime or reporting a crime, you want to make sure that the police contacts a family member or the person's advocate or friend to help them through the interview process that might happen at that time. Right, and so let's take this up beyond the police and talk about criminal justice for a second. There are some potential issues related to the criminal justice system and people with autism. So a person with autism may get in trouble without even realizing they committed the offense. There's potential confusion with the meaning and implications of lots of technical or legal terminology that might definitely not be able to be understood. I can't understand some of them myself. They may more often confess more quickly. They may say what they think a police officer might want to hear. They may not understand the implications of Miranda rights. Often they may plead guilty more often, and they are often convicted of an offense more than a reduced charge, and that can be for a number of reasons. And we're going to talk about police education in a moment. And inmates with ASD may have more difficulty learning rules and regulations that may happen in while incarcerated or in a correctional facility. And then that may result in more accumulated rule infractions. And unfortunately, inmates with ASD are denied parole more frequently. This information here comes from the ARC of New Jersey, and unfortunately true. And we need to consider a lot of these and elevate our level of education of individuals with autism as well as those within the criminal justice system. Often, criminal justice, unfortunately, is associated with violence. And there have been several research studies that have found either no link between autism and violent crime, or they could not reach a conclusion about the link. Autism is so often stigmatized and associated with violent crimes. Research studies need to look at people throughout our communities, not only those who are incarcerated in psychiatric hospitals or in group homes. There's Dr. Matthew Lerner. He's an associate professor in the psychology department at Stony Brook University. He focused on social competence and treatment. He's investigated criminal behavior in teens and adolescents with ASD. He suggested that research studies look at factors such as profound isolation and loneliness that can affect everyone, not just those with ASD. And what that loneliness and isolation does, the relationship it has to crime. Now, offenders may have deficits in moral reasoning, understanding other people's perspective, controlling or regulating their emotions. And this is hard for many people with autism. And so some states have allowed autism to be used as a defense or to determine someone's competency to stand trial. Now, compared to their non-disabled peers, U.S. students with disabilities are more likely to be suspended from school, referred to police, or arrested for school-related incidents, and may be charged in the juvenile justice system. So typically, the crimes of youth with ASD were very mild, and very few are convicted. I emphasize this, again, because there's really not a lot of not a lot, but I think that more emphasis and more education and more research needs to be done to destigmatize this whole relationship with autism and violence and what happens within the criminal justice system. Most times, though, people with autism are more likely to be victims than they are to be the perpetrators. And subsequently, or just generally, when young children in schools are more likely, children with autism are more likely to be bullied more often than other children than to be the bulliers. They can be bullies, they can be perpetrators, as we just discussed, but they're more likely to be the victims. So kind of summarizing that up, New Jersey is really very, very lucky to have this criminal justice advocacy program. And this is, they do a lot of things. They provide alternatives to incarcerations for those with developmental disabilities that find themselves within the criminal justice system. It's the only one that's like it of its kind in New Jersey. It definitely has so much information, so you can go onto this website that I provided here and get information about offenders with developmental disabilities, and it also serves to be a liaison between the criminal justice system and human service systems. And so it helps really with the quality of care that's provided for and with people with very special needs within the criminal justice system. There's a recorded webinar that I would love for you to listen to. It's Creating a Culture of Prevention. It's addressing autism in today's criminal justice system. Really a very well done webinar. It provides individual strategies and advocates for system reform. So really, I recommend this one very much. I think it provides a lot of information on this topic. There's also autism in the criminal justice system. So this also is an article that is very much worth reading. Again, talks about behaviors and intent and the ability of people with autism to really what the effect that has within a criminal justice system. Okay, so I'm going to flip to the next topic, and we're going to be talking about preparing and responding to emergencies. So as we all know, emergencies can happen anytime, and so every person with autism or not needs to be as prepared as possible for an emergency. Now, some towns have confidential special needs identification programs, like computer-aided dispatch. When a person provides that information to their community, it is voluntary, it's confidential. So we need to help either the people with autism definitely self-advocate for themselves, or we help a person with autism really be able to communicate with their local emergency dispatchers or about safety issues that affect them personally. So how to do that is we would help them, or we can find out who receives the dispatch calls within that person's community. So sometimes it might be the police department, sometimes it may be an outside agency, sometimes it might be the fire department. We don't want to call 911, but we want to find out who that dispatch center is and contact them. And then we want to make an appointment to share that information that's critical to them. You know, whether they may not respond to verbal command, whether they may be non-ambulatory, they may be non-communicative, without, a functional means of communication. It could be, their hypersensitivities to things, but we want to make sure we have those communication with the dispatcher. The information, again, remains confidential, and it's only used with those responding to the 911 call. It is important, very important, to have these conversations and to plan before the emergency happens. So when we're communicating with anybody, and right now I'm going to first talk about EMTs, and then I'm going to talk about firefighters, I recommend that the individual with autism or their family member makes arrangements to have a conversation with their local emergency responders. So first, we'll talk about emergency medical technicians, or EMTs. Those conversations can happen at open houses, at town fairs, or actually going and making a personal visit there. We want to communicate their special needs. We want to talk about any kind of sensory stimuli that may be upsetting or affect them in any way. Things that would calm them down, topics or just anything that would help that person calm down in an emergency. Help them get familiarized with the ambulance and the sounds it makes and what it's like to be inside that vehicle. ICE information, and that's in case of emergency information. We'll talk about that in a moment. And identification. So what type of does that person carry identification? And if that person is incapacitated, or if their caregivers are incapacitated, can that identification provide substantial or sufficient information for that first responder? Now, for the firefighter, it's very similar. We want to communicate specific needs, and again, the sensory information. But what about their personal fire escape plans? What about their house? How would they get out of their home? Are there different ways that they need to escape? If one area, if one place is, blocked, can they get out another way? Are they able to respond to the first responder, either verbally, receptively, expressively? How do they do that? What about their are they familiar with the uniforms or the equipment that a firefighter uses? And it can be often scary for anybody, but what to do in those kinds of situations. And again, the identification. Now, calling 911 and using 911 is something that when I teach about this, we just want to make sure the person with 911 understands what the purpose of 911 is, and not only that, if they understand what an emergency is. So they need to recognize what an emergency is before they actually can use 911, or we can teach 911. But then once we realize, if we could make the determination they can, then we can teach them how to call 911, and when they call 911, what they should say and what they should do. And Children's Specialized Hospital has developed this particular resource here to help teach that, and provides a little script even for the person with autism to practice in case they do need to call 911. So this is that could be a helpful resource for education here. The ICE, or in case of emergency, it's important for a person to carry information that would be helpful for emergency responders and healthcare providers. It could be on your cell phone. Sometimes you can carry it as a wallet card, but it really should at least carry the contact person for that in case of emergency that someone should call in case of emergency. There's a helpful app that I have found. It's called ACE for Autism, and you can see here a lot of the things that it lets the person put in. Really, a lot of things we just talked about and would be very, very helpful in case of emergency. So I would suggest checking that out a little bit. Okay, so when we talk about medication and supplies, these are things a person with ASD, or any person for that matter, should ask themselves and prepare themselves before the emergency happens. So do they have medical information and the medical supplies they need? Does the person know how to get their medical supplies, how to get their emergency supply of medicines, how to plan in case they need to stop it because of a disaster? And do they know how long that their medicine can last and how to store them? God forbid there's a lack of electricity and there's no refrigeration, and potentially their medication might need to be refrigerated. So these are some things that a person should know about their medication and medical supplies. Medical checklist. This definitely could be a wallet card, but it could also very effectively be done on your electronic device. But keeping a copy of prescription information, including the name, location, phone number of not only the pharmacy that is used, but the out-of-town pharmacy in case that pharmacy is closed. Really, definitely something to be prepared for when medication is in place, or is needed. I'm sorry. I recommend this for everyone, but particularly for people with autism, we really should have this type of either printed and/or electronic list of their biographical information, what they like, what they dislike, list of diagnoses, allergies, surgeries, doctors, information. Technology is very important. Insurance information, all of these things. I'm not going to go into detail, but these are very, very specific. And would really be very helpful for a person with autism who may not be able to convey a lot of this information that's needed for emergencies. A helpful resource that can be really used as a guide is disaster preparedness for people with autism. This is available on the website I listed below, prepared by the NJACE group here in New Jersey, and I really recommend just reviewing this again as a guide, not only for preparedness, but for education. A lot of people don't know about this particular organization, or I should say website or phone number. It's called Register Ready, or 211. This allows New Jersey residents with disabilities or with any kind of special needs, it could be access needs, physical or functional needs, an opportunity to provide information to emergency response agencies so that emergency responders can better plan to serve them in disaster or other emergencies. So New Jersey Register Ready was created to help people with a disability in times of emergency. So New Jersey residents with autism, I encourage them to add their personal information to this special needs registry. The information will be shared with emergency response agencies so that the emergency responders will be better equipped during the emergency in your area. The information is confidential, definitely not shared with anybody, only for preparedness information only. To keep it current, I recommend to families to evaluate this and go in annually and look and update that information. It's very important that you take the time to prepare what that person needs. For a physical disability, it may be that they use a wheelchair. For a person with autism, it may be some medications or other needs, communication devices. But I recommend this very much for preparedness, not only for the individual themselves, but for the community that supports them. So here's some, I just wanted to give you a few other emergency preparedness websites that are very helpful. You can refer back to them. I provided the websites for each of them here on this page. The other thing I think people with autism should be prepared for is the alerts. So sometimes individuals don't know how to get their local alerts to them, and so the NOAA Weather Radio All Hazards does provide early warnings for these types of disasters. So the website there is available for you. So creating a safety plan. So this, I recommend that either the person with autism does independently or with his or her caregiver to develop a plan of what to do in an emergency. And this is really a reflective, really something that should be done on a very personal level. Again, ways that a person would need to get calm in case they're in a situation that might be upsetting to them, how they react to a dangerous situation, who they should contact if they're lost, instructions of for people to follow. So what hospital they want to go to, what treatments they want to be used. This is really very personal, personal decisions for anyone. And I think for me, it's very important for a person with autism to be given the opportunity to express what their challenges are and what their decisions and what they really want to be done in a calm situation. We don't want to do this during the emergency. As I said earlier, it really should be done prior to the emergency. It can be done, it doesn't have to be anything formal. It can be done online or, handwritten. But when you come up with this, review it with the person that you trust and prepare for different scenarios. So if something were to happen in the house or a certain part of the house in the community, we would need to prepare for different types of scenarios and responses, and then updating that at least annually as needed. You can make this very pictorial, but really something, again, be very personalized and really very important to make sure that a person with autism has their own voice to decide what they want to do in an emergency. So putting that all together for emergency preparedness, we've got these things that we need to look at. We need to prevent, we need to protect the environment, we need to plan, prepare, practice safety skills, and participate in safety programs. So those are everything that I just talked about, all put together on one slide, but I think these things solve it again: preparing, protecting, planning, preparing, practicing, and participating. All right, the next topic we're going to talk about is internet safety. These are some potential issues for everyone, including those with ASD, related to using the internet. We need to be looking at potential exposure to inappropriate and unsafe content. How do we does the person have the ability to differentiate between fiction and reality? There are we know many predatory websites and phishing schemes, and that's where people send you emails that are, they seem to be from legitimate sources, but they're not. So these are some these are internet safety tips, and including online harassment and sharing personal information and manipulation. We need to really pay attention to a lot of these and include these in our safety safety lessons and reviews. So one of the things I want to highlight is creating that anonymous nickname or the username when we're using social networks. So for instance, if I created a nickname for myself, we want to make sure we help the people with autism remain anonymous. So my name is Adrian Robertiello in Fanwood, New Jersey. My username could be ARINFNJ. So these are the kinds of things that we can help a person with autism be able to do so they are safe on the internet. And so review some of these tips here, and there's more here about safe and appropriate sharing of your photos or anonymous emails, those email scams and phishing, as I mentioned, or even the danger of meeting up with online strangers, people that, that they don't know, and now there's a potential meeting that is asked for. So we want to make sure that a person with autism is really aware of a lot of these internet safety issues, and we need to teach to them. So here's a helpful resource for our teens with ASD and adolescents and adults as well. I provided the link here, but it's Internet Safety for Teens with ASD. It's very specific and very interesting. It's the Center on Secondary Education for Students with Autism Spectrum Disorders. Indiana created this. It's an informative resource related to internet safety. It discusses risks like fixation on games, social networking sites, exposure to inappropriate material. It talks about predators, cyberbullying. It provides suggestions for parents and for school staff to teach internet safety. It uses a helpful acronym called Play It Safe, and that's to teach and remind teens with autism about internet safety. So I recommend going onto the link and seeing really a lot of helpful information there. As well, there's another website there, paautism.org. They provide a few really helpful resources with regard to social media and the internet. It talks about the benefits and the risks of social media, how to check privacy settings, and social networking, a guide to best practices. Recommend it very highly. Cyberbullying, really, to me, not emphasized enough, not enough education done in this regard. It's real, and it has horrible effects on children and adults with or without disabilities, with or without autism. These are some of the issues related to cyberbullying, and these can be even more troublesome for some people with autism. Dr. Jed Baker had created this book, No More Victims: Protecting Those with Autism from Cyberbullying, Internet Predators, and Scams. Really definitely worth the read if we're looking at cyberbullying and those with autism. Talks about prevention, victimization, internet scams, and also insiders' view on keeping safe in the digital world. Recommend the book highly. And a few more things that I didn't discuss really briefly. First one, is ATM safety. I don't think we talk about that even among ourselves enough, but for those with autism, we need to help them understand how to approach an ATM, whether that be they're driving up to an ATM or walking up, and the safety aspects of that, how to use the ATM, waiting in the line, giving a person personal space, using a password, hiding the password, and then that whole skimmer prevention. That's the equipment that sometimes, unfortunately, is used to get a person's ATM card. Now, that could be on the ATM machine itself, or sometimes that could be actually when using your ATM card at a restaurant or in a store. We really need to educate on that as well. And service animals. I don't think enough credit is given to service animals who are trained to help keep people with ASD safe. These animals can help alert others, guard them against a hazardous situation that might be in the area, preventing them from escaping for a person who has wandering or elopement issues. It can provide a person with a sense of calm or security and sensory input, can detect seizures, teach responsibility caretaking. Lots of things here are really very valuable. The service animal would be trained specifically for the person with autism, depending on his or her needs, but I would not, I really want to emphasize that these animals are being trained more and more to help, not only help a person with autism, or a lot of special needs, but helping keep them safe. In educating people with autism, we want to talk about using IEP goals. So we're talking about adolescents, even from, I recommend from very, very young, but from young to adolescents and adults, we need to incorporate safety goals within the educational programs. Practicing, using role playing. We can have other people and interact with you and potentially practice different types of safety and situations that may happen either with the police officers or in fire safety, community safety, home safety, video modeling, which where a person could watch the correct way to do something safely. Look at reliable websites, some of which I presented to you today, and in getting involved in different types of collaborative behavior modification strategies for those who have behavioral issues and challenges that are definitely involved in safety risks. So that might be a fire setting behavior, things that we talked about earlier in the household, what could be with detergents or water safety, lots of things that we want to make sure that if there are behaviors involved that need to be changed, that we work collaboratively to help change those behaviors. And when we teach safety, we must make sure that, and this is very important to me as an instructor in all aspects of teaching, but particularly for those with autism, we need to make sure that the safety plans are appropriate, they're clear, they're simple for the person to understand. When we develop these safety lessons, we want to make sure that we include that whatever the person's barriers are to safety, we want to identify and provide access to ways to overcome those barriers. And we want to provide methods for the person to get support and challenges with their challenges. Ask questions, get their questions answered, and really have a personal stake in their safety plan. So definitely, please use this slide as a guide when we are teaching safety and communicating safety with those with autism. Children's Specialized Hospital, through Cole's CARES and Cole's Autism Awareness, has developed a lot of safety resources for those with autism. You can see some of them here. The website is there at www.childrens-specialized.org/Cole's Autism Awareness. Lots there, and we keep on adding more, so please check by the website. I hope these and a lot of the information that I provided for you today is very helpful to supporting and educating about safety. So now, and I wanted to give one more, I'm sorry. This one here is another website that really can help support, it says a child safety, but really is regarding all aspects of safety for every age, and I think is a really good guide and a good website to use as a reference. So now we can begin to take questions, and I'd love to help you in any way I can. So let me hear what you have, and hopefully at least what I've offered you today has started to answer some of those questions, but I'd really like to hear more from other people now.
Hi, Adrian. So thank you so much for all that wonderful information. I think we'll just take one question. One question that came in was if you could comment about the availability of personal tracking devices in different counties in New Jersey. Did you hear that question? Thank you, Adrian, for all the valuable information. We have time for just one question, and the question that came in is, could you please comment about the availability of personal tracking devices in different counties in New Jersey?
Hi, thank you, Jill. For many people, there are many people with ASD who have a tendency to elope or wander from unsafe areas into unsafe areas. I'm sorry. There's a website that I often refer to called AWARE. That's AWAARE. It stands for Autism, Wandering, Awareness, Alerts, Response, and Education. It's a collaboration of organizations who have coordinated their resources, and they established some guidelines and tools to promote awareness, education, safety that are focused on autism and wandering. The website for that AWARE is AWARE.nationalautismassociation.org. On the website, there's a tab, it's a resource tab, and under that, there's a link for tracking technology, and that under there it describes different types of tracking technology and features, the pros and the cons. One specific popular tracking device that there is called Project Lifesaver. This technology it's popular, and it helps first responders locate those with specific diagnoses who are prone to wandering. In New Jersey, it's implemented in every county through their sheriff's department. It may be part of your county's search and rescue team or with your sheriff's department canine unit. It's a device that's battery operated. It has a radio transmitter. The person wears it either on their ankle or on their wrist. It emits a unique automatic tracking signal, so then the sheriff's department would be equipped to track that signal through their equipment. So if you go to their website, if you're interested, it's www.projectlifesaver.org, and you can click on About Us, and then to find out where it's located, where there's an agency near you, all you'll have to do is click on the option under the About Us tab to find an agency. Then you can enter your zip code, and you'll be able to give your contact information there. There are many other personal tracking devices available for children all the way to elders. And there's a lot of considerations to evaluate. So when you assess any device, whether that be Project Lifesaver or any other, you want to find one that is appropriate and will function best for the person. You need to consider the battery life, the durability, water resistance, the range. There's something called breadcrumb tracking, which identifies where the person has been, and geofencing, where you can set up boundaries, and then you can get alerted when the person has left those particular boundaries. And you consider other types of alerts, and there's panic buttons and two-way communication and all of those things. So really you need to highly consider and evaluate a personal tracking device before you purchase it. But again, Project Lifesaver is available throughout the state through your local sheriff's department here in New Jersey. Also, cell phones and mobile, smartphones and cellular devices, they can also help. Many of them have tracking capabilities as well.
Okay, that's great information. Thank you so much, Adrian, and thank you to all of our listeners. The slide deck for this presentation will also be available on the NJACE website, so please check there, and don't forget to fill out the evaluation forms to give us some valuable feedback. The next NJACE webinar is on transition to adult healthcare for youth with ASD, and that will be broadcast on Tuesday, September 10th. So please feel free to sign up on our website, and thanks again for joining us today.